So 40K's game balance throughout 9th edition really has been pretty bad, but it really seems that Games Workshop have outdone themselves this time. The latest codex seems to have brought 40K to a whole new low. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the general situation of competitive 40K. It's generally a very rocky road indeed where Games Workshop's game balance is concerned, but it really seems to have gone off a cliff over the last few months. A few weeks back I made a video focusing on Tau and Custodes, why at the top end of the game they were flattening basically most armies that they played against, and the ridiculous win rates that they were seeing against the competition. Between the two of them, they were making up more than 50% of podium spots at grand tournaments, and their win rates really were pretty obscene, going into the upper 60%, when it's perhaps generally considered that for a fairly healthy and balanced game, you should be aiming at somewhere in the mid to low 50s. It was kind of painful on the backdrop of Chapter Approved actually doing some reasonable jobs at reining in some of the most powerful codexes. We'd had Admech and Drukhari knocked off their lofty perches, Grey Knights toned down a bit, and Orc Boggy Spam reined in. The field was looking a fair bit more even, and then they go and release these two codexes, the power level just being on an entirely different level to what came before. It was kind of disappointing to see after we'd just had a year where Drukhari and Admech had been running rampant for the vast majority of it, and when it looked like they'd managed to get the majority of the other balances of the different armies really quite in a good spot. Rather than issuing any sort of emergency balance patch though to update the factions, Games Workshop appears to have taken a bit more of a hold my beer approach to game balance. You think that these were bad? Well, wait a bit to see what's coming next. Of course, what came next was the Eldari Codex, the big combined book with Craft Worlds, Inari, and Harlequins, and it's kind of ironic that the clowns are what's turning 40K's game balance into a complete joke. It seems that the actual Craft World Eldar section of the book that got all their new releases doesn't really seem to be the problem so far. They seem to be at least fairly comparable in strength to Custodes and Tau. Maybe there'd be an issue if Harlequins weren't the way they are, but seeing as Harlequins are trolling just about every single strong army in the game right now, the main Craft World options do definitely seem like a secondary concern. The Craft World's army lists have only really been seen in force in the tournaments over the last 2 weeks. The previous week, I think that not all tournaments were using them, and also there's usually some degree of scrabbling around to get models and lists together. But this week they're basically demolishing the competition, winning no less than 6 grand tournaments worldwide, including the 4 biggest. I'd bear in mind that this means that they're basically trouncing even the very strong Custodes and Tau. Harlequin lists over the last 2 weeks make up almost 30% of podium spots at grand tournaments. Kind of ridiculous for really quite a niche faction that not as many people play as, say, Space Marines or Tau, and their win rate has been around about the 70 to 75% mark, truly outrageous in competitive 40K, very similar to the sort of numbers that Iron Hands were putting out for Space Marines when their codex initially dropped. It basically means that Harlequins players are winning about 3 out of every 4 games that they play, and that's even not accounting for mirror matches, which means that whenever Harlequins play other Harlequins, that guarantees them at least 1 loss every single time that happens. Custodes and Tau seem to be slipping more towards the 55 to 60% win rate range, as a lot of them are getting decimated by Space Clowns. Overall, it kind of looks like the 40K meta is really going from bad to worse. Harlequins appear to be the absolute kings of the tabletop, and even if Games Workshop does hit them with some hefty nerfs in the balanced data slate, then Custodes, Tau, and maybe Craft Worlds are still likely to be fairly overpowered compared with the other factions. So why are Harlequins doing quite so well at the moment then? It is kind of crazy that a codex with just 8 units in it can be quite so out of line. You're basically going to be winding up talking about the vast majority of the book. If we start with the units, the Shadowseer is a great centerpiece to the army. It shields the nearby troops from harm with a -1 to wound roll. Has Mirror Architect, which it can apply to jet bikes as well, and that one means that enemy guns have to count as if they were an extra 6 inches further away. Really quite unhelpful for long range weapons, but could be devastating for close 12-inch range weapons which aren't going to be able to shoot out of reserves or anything. As well as that, they can also put out some buffing spells like a 6+ Feel No Pain or double movement, and do some psychic actions if you need to do that for secondaries. Then there's the Troop Master, another great staple, basically a really dangerous melee HQ with a lot of really good builds, perhaps one of the most common combinations being Segarax Rose, the very destructive Relic Harlequin's Kiss, and Foot in the Future for some crazy threat ranges, boosted advances, and a very unusual rule where he just gets a +6 inches to his charge, basically meaning that you're almost guaranteeing being able to charge anything that you can declare one on. Then there's the Death Jester. We mentioned him in a recent video where we talked about him being one of the best snipers in all of 40K. His Shrieker Cannon's already quite good damage output, but then you can combine it with a pivotal roll that gives you 3 extra hits on every roll of a 6, and a Warlord trait that gives you an automatic hit roll of a 6. It means he averages around about 6 hits with that dangerous streaker cannon for a character that's around about 70 points. Then, besides characters, we've got the main workhorses of the army, Harlequin troops and Star Weavers. Star Weavers really are quite tough to shift, and of course very fast transports with some shuriken cannons, and the troops can skirmish with most enemy infantry really nicely, have great movement, and are brilliant for objectives, plus they have all sorts of stratagem support which we'll get onto. Then, and perhaps most infamously out of the new codex, are the Void Weavers, perhaps the most obvious unit where you can just point at it and say that is clearly undercosted by a long way. Excellent anti-tank and anti-infantry firepower on a great mobile platform that's really tough to shift at range with a 4+ invul, and also being able to fire and fade to potentially hide behind terrain after shooting. In most Harlequin lists, it does seem to be a really brain-dead easy move just to spam 9 of these. It's rare that you're going to have any sort of matchup where they don't do serious work. That's 6 out of the 8 units in the codex, and I describe both Solitaires and Skyweavers as pretty usable, though maybe just feel a little bit less mandatory than the others. They can still both do some pretty ridiculous things. As well as just having super strong units, you then generally put them in the Sadath of Light. Again, I don't really think that Dark or Twilight are bad rules at all. Both very usable indeed, but I think Light is generally going to be better for the vast majority of lists and matchups. Essentially, their chapter tactic makes hit rolls of 1 to 3 always fail, very painful for Custodians in particular with their great weapon skill and ballistic skill, and their units can advance and shoot normally, and as their bikes move 6 inches extra, it means Void Weavers are going 22 inches and still firing. And of course it's still great news for things like fusion pistols for troops, and any Skyweavers with shuriken cannons that you brought along. All of those are great, but perhaps one of the most insane horrible things that they can do is the 1 command point Capricious Reflection stratagem, where for 1 command point, when your unit is charged, you can casually move it 6 inches in any direction, often meaning that unless your opponent manages to position to threaten lots of units, their units might well be left in a position where they're just not going to be able to reach your Harlequins, something they might have already struggled with anyway due to their insane movement. Depending on how the arm is positioned, you might say have some Genestealer cults trying to deep strike in and charge some Void Weavers, only to find out it's completely impossible when they move greater than 12 inches away. Even their Warlord trait and relic are good though. The Shadowstone is almost mandatory on a Shadowseer, and the Warlord trait does add an extra bit of oomph to the Troop Master's attacks, making him yet more dangerous in melee. I feel like the Sadath of Light rules are certainly one of the main parts of the problem to Harlequins. If they get toned down a bit, I still think that Dark and Twilight are still going to shine through and be very strong though. Finally, beyond that though, Harlequins just have some excellent army rules. A lot of their units get 4+ invul saves, -1s to hits, advanced and charges, and fall back and charge. All of those things seemed kind of fine in the previous codex where the units were costed to represent that. It's only really become a problem in the new one where the units are either really cheap or just really threatening. Luck of the Laughing God just piles on yet more generic strength where you need it, a few rerolls of wound rolls or punch through a bit of extra damage, or even better to reroll invul saves on your Void Weavers, and you can make them even more of a nightmare to shift. The infantry have amazing stratagem support. You wouldn't necessarily be making use of all of these every battle, but a lot of these can be situationally really great. You've got options to prevent enemy units from falling back, getting a 3+ invul save if you need it, +1 damage on the charge, fighting again if you absolutely need to end a key threat, 6-inch heroic intervention so you don't want to be too near them, jumping back into a transport, and a big blitz of mortal wounds either from the Harlequin's kisses or embraces, whichever makes more sense in the situation. You're not going to be able to make use of all of those every game given the command points, but even 1 or 2 of those at a pivotal moment could bring a really big swing to the game, either killing an opponent's unit or saving yours. Finally, one thing about playing against Harlequins in general are Mirage launchers. You find these on all their jet bikes, and they basically prevent rerolls to hit against them, which can be really nasty against certain factions, particularly in combination with the -1 to hit and lights not allowing hit rolls of 1 to 3 to hit at all. If your faction put a lot of value into support characters, or you have a chapter trait that allows you to reroll some hit rolls, like maybe Bealtan Eldar, or you've got something like a chapter master or Primarch on the go, getting absolutely none of those can really hurt your damage output an absolute ton, and it can create some very bad matchups for certain armies that have gone heavy on them. Overall, it basically all comes together into an army that's just ridiculously fast and fairly easy to play, packs enormous damage, and then still has access to a massive amount of buffed characters and Harlequin sneaky tricks to make sure that the opponent's fighting on the back foot the entire game, even if you might just have been able to overpower them with raw strength anyway. Just as a quick example of what 40K's Harlequins can achieve at the moment, here's a list I featured briefly on the channel the other week. It's by Matt Robertson, who used it to take second at the Summer Winehammer tournament, and looks like it's really quite typical for Harlequin light builds. I'm buffing Shadowseer with Webway Dance and Fog of Dreams, and Mirror Architect and the Shadowstone to keep a lot of units safe. That Troop Master that we talked about with both Player of Light for the extra damage and Foot in the Future for the long charges with the Rose, the Sniping Death Jester, and also a Solitaire with Prince of Sins. There's then 6 troops, 2 basic ones just for objectives and actions and things, and then 3 with fusion pistols and combat weapons to go in the transports. They're casted around in 4 Star Weavers, and then there's 3 big squadrons of 3 Void Weavers, just to make sure that you're winning the long range battle without too much difficulty. Lots of armies just aren't going to be able to keep up with this kind of speed, and if you do, then you're often going to be fighting at a big disadvantage with all the tricks that the Harlequins can pull. Never mind the fact that you're going to have big chunks of your army torn out every single turn with those Void Weavers. Generalist firepower that's just going to destroy whatever it needs to each turn. It still takes skill to place highly at a grand tournament with any list. You're going to be fighting all the other top factions lists as well as other Harlequins, so I'm not trying to take away from that. But it does seem that compared with the other codexes at the moment, Harlequins are going to give you a much easier shot. So overall, between the already dominant Custodes and Tau, and then Harlequins showing up to make them look like they're not very good, the onus really is on Games Workshop to try and fix this now, as this is the kind of imbalance that really goes above and beyond what they've had before, to the extent where I'm sure it's turning a lot of people off playing 40k, particularly at any sort of competitive level. I don't think it's going to stop most people enjoying the game though. Harlequins are still a very niche faction that aren't going to be showing up in the majority of games, and I think there's still generally a lot of fun to be had in tournaments. Hopefully you don't get more than one matchup against an army that utterly outclasses yours, and you can spend a lot of the rest of the event playing against armies which are a bit more on the same level as your faction. Still though, I think just about everyone would really quite like Games Workshop to step in and make the game a bit more balanced than it currently is. It's not like it would really be too hard. It sounds like we might not have too long to wait. Halfway through me making this video, Games Workshop announced the next balance data slate. That's hopefully going to be coming out next week, and they did confirm that it is going to see some tone downs for the Harlequins, though I'm not sure exactly what form that's going to take. I think they could certainly go a long way with just some points nerfs. I think it's really one of the armies where they could do something similar to AdMech, just raise the cost on just about every unit, maybe not even necessarily by very much, and hopefully turn them into an army that's still very strong in its own right, but hopefully isn't just head and shoulders above everything else by a clear mile. I'd really not be too surprised if they saw some changes to Town Custodians as well. Maybe we can explore some of the things that we'd like to see in another video a little bit down the line. I must admit I do quite like their balanced data slate mechanic. At least we don't have to wait half a year for books to go into print, and then things like Chapter Approved come out that react to a meta that's long past. It really does show how those books don't really work when the last one came out, heavily nerfing things like Sisters and Death Guard. I do wonder whether or not the balanced data slate might well buff other factions, as well as tone down the strong stuff. Armies like Guard, Chaos and Demons could all use some benefits in the meantime while they're waiting for their codexes, and a lot of the other factions that do have 9th edition codexes kind of have nerfs that might be seen as unnecessary now. If they're not going to do all that much to things like Custodes or Tau, then perhaps some of the previous nerfs to armies like Death Guard, Sisters or Grey Knights are a bit more redundant now. I do strongly suspect that this balanced data slate is going to give us some decent positive change, though I hope it doesn't get completely made redundant by all the other codexes that are coming out. After all, we had decent balance changes in January, followed by Tau and Custodes. I really hope that we don't get left in the situation where the balanced data slate drops, and then Tyranids and Knights are the things that just dominate the meta for the next few months. I'm kind of interested to see where Tyranids stack up in particular. A lot of their units do look very strong, maybe things like the Maleceptor, Harpy and Leviathan warriors in particular. It's going to be interesting to see how well they fight the current top dogs of the meta. In any case, I do hope that Games Workshop managed to do something about the whole thing. In my opinion, I do really quite like the 9th core rule set. I think they've done really quite well with it, but so far it feels like we've had almost an entire edition where the codexes just aren't very well externally balanced at all, and constant codex creep just makes it a bit more reductive, meaning that you're almost certainly just going to be doing well if you have the last couple of books, and your army is going to be generally quite weak if you haven't had an update in a fair while. So anyway, look forward to hearing what you think of the current state of competitive 40k down in the comments below. If you had the power to make some changes on the next balanced data slate, what would you go for? I look forward to hearing all your thoughts, ideas and suggestions. If you've enjoyed the video, feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, where I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page, and you can find that down in the video description. The channel's Patreon page is what keeps these videos coming quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. I do try and give as many good rewards for channel backers as I can, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some really big model kits every month. If any of that's of interest to you, or you'd just like to help support, then the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.